Meanwhile, Richard Sherman is usually the one to do the talking when it comes to the Seahawks organization, right? But on the Brock and Salk show on 710 ESPN Seattle, it was Doug Baldwin who opened up about who, you ask, his teammate Richard Sherman, and he did not care who was listening.
Sherm's greatest asset can also be his greatest weakness. You know, he's very smart, and sometimes he thinks he's smarter than he is. And I have no quarrels with saying that, because I'll say that to his face. There's times where it can become a distraction, but you know, we have guys on our team who are mature enough to know when to take it over the line and when to back off. And sometimes Sherm is the main one who does that, because we get frustrated at times. As competitive as we get, we know how successful and how good we can be, and when we're not living up to that expectation, it is frustrating.
Keep in mind, Doug Baldwin, of course, was teammates with Richard Sherman at Stanford, also highly intelligent. So is Will Kane. Good to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
I want to start with you, though, Stephen A. What do you make of Baldwin's comments on Sherman?
Well, I respect his opinion because he's his teammate, not just in college, but in the pros, and he obviously knows Richard Sherman significantly more than me. So I don't think his words can be summarily dismissed in terms of, you know, the insight he provides, because it's simply, you know, you can't challenge it unless you're that close to Richard Sherman, which I don't know anybody in the media to be. Even though I know Richard Sherman a little bit, and we certainly talk from time to time, as I do with several members in that locker room. I will tell you this, where I respectfully disagree with Doug Baldwin, but not in a debatable fashion, is looking on the outside in and just watching this team. The problem with this team is not their defense. The problem with this team is religiously their offense. It's their offensive line since Unger was gone. It's their running back since Marshawn Lynch departed. It's all of those things. And Russell Wilson injuries, not an elite receiver on their squad, even though Doug Baldwin can play, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at the Seattle Seahawks, and you got questions about them, it ain't their defense, it's their offense. When I look at Richard Sherman, I see a dude that religiously is one of the top 5 to top 7 corners in the game. Religiously, over the past 5 or 6 years, of going about the business of making sure that half or less of the passes thrown in his direction and his coverage get completed. You don't complete passes on a regular basis against this man. When you're a elite receiver and you're a Julio Jones and you're catching, you know, 9 passes for 180 yards against Green Bay, you go against a Richard Sherman and suddenly the number is 6 receptions for 67 yards. Don't tell me that Richard Sherman is the problem. Can he be a distraction? Anybody could be somewhat of a distraction if they have a mouth on them and they're smart and they know it, and as a result, their intellect is in your face all the time, because sometimes they can think they're actually smarter than they really are. I go through it every day. Look at the 2 people that I'm going to on the show with me right now. You know, they think they're brilliant.
In your face.
But the point is, at the end of the day, Richard Sherman's production elevates above all that noise. And I don't think this is applicable to him, even though I respect where Doug Baldwin is coming from, because he has a right to do so.
I don't see this as an issue at all. In fact, I see this as a reflection of a healthy environment that Pete Carroll has fostered here. I mean, this is what it's about, honest communication. You could say, don't air your dirty laundry, but Doug Baldwin said, I have no problem saying this to his face, and I'm sure he doesn't. I don't understand really the problem with that if it's not something he wouldn't tell him to his face, and this is the way the team communicates. This is what it's about, and it's not always easy going, but I see a team not making excuses. The defense isn't there going, well, the problem is the O-line and the no running game publicly. They'll look at themselves. Everyone will look at themselves. If someone asks a player a question, they'll give him an honest answer. And in fact, Baldwin went on to say that same competitive drive is what makes Richard Sherman the best cornerback in the game. So he's really answering honestly, and I don't see where this is a problem. This is the kind of team that has that kind of loose enough environment that the players can vent, even sometimes in public demonstrations of anger at one another, but it's always understood that it's in the service of individuals wanting to win and come together as a team, and that's to Pete Carroll's credit, and it's to the players' credit, and it's the reason that they have been the closest thing the NFC has to the Patriots in recent years.
You don't see a problem, Max, because there isn't one. There is no problem. And despite what Stephen A. Smith just argued to all of us, Doug Baldwin didn't place all of the Seattle Seahawks problems on the shoulders of Richard Sherman. He didn't use Richard Sherman as a distraction, as a scapegoat for all of the Seahawks' problem. What you said, yeah. What you said,
all. I said all.
You went on to use Doug Baldwin's comments to then point out that Richard Sherman isn't the problem with the team, and both can be true. It is true. The Seahawks offensive line is their problem. Richard Sherman's cornerback play is not their problem. But here's what's great about what Baldwin said. It is the kind of honesty we rarely get in sports. What we have known to be true, what is obvious to all of our eyes, that Richard Sherman can be a distraction to a team, has now been validated by somebody in that locker room. Not only that, one of his best friends dating back through his pro career to his college career. When you yell at the offensive coordinator on the sidelines, when you threaten a member of the media that you could ruin their career or have their press credentials revoked, false by the way, you can become and are a distraction to the team. We now have it from the team, from possibly the closest member on the Seahawks to Richard Sherman. Now, does that mean every problem that the Seahawks have is Richard Sherman's fault? Of course it doesn't. Nobody would argue that it does. But what we now know is true is that our eyes aren't lying to us. And when pundits and people that get on TV, for some reason there's this trend to be an athlete apologist, that never what we see is true, that no one's ever guilty of bad behavior, that no one can ever be a distraction. But when our eyes are showing us the opposite, it turns out we're right. And here's the real kicker. Baldwin is so smart on this, so incredibly intelligent. I am a firm subscriber to the your greatest strength can be your greatest weakness philosophy. He points that out with Richard Sherman. His passion, his smarts, they go over the edge. His pride leads him to being the best. His pride leads him to not listening. Every one of us are guilty of this. Stephen A., you're a great talker. You could do a bit more listening. Max, you're a great analyzer. Perhaps a bit more action. Me, we're still looking for these things with me. We're looking for these weaknesses. But this is true. Your strength is your weakness in life. You've got to manage that line.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciated Dr. Phil. I'm really touched by your analysis there. Thank you so much. That's number one. Number two, you sitting there and pointing out how some media members are apologists for athletes. Well, maybe if you got yourself in a locker room more and got to know these guys on a personal level, you wouldn't be calling anybody an apologist. You would recognize the need to be fair, because when an individual gives you a direct perspective from where they're coming from,
excuse me,
you take that. Hold on.
Was I not sitting with you yesterday? Was I not sitting with you yesterday?
I let you speak. Did I not let you speak? I let you speak. My point to you is this. If you're sitting up there and you're talking about an individual, and that individual decides to comment and speak directly to you, in this position as a journalist, as a member of the Fourth Estate, actually covering teams and covering athletes and doing it for over 20 years, you do feel an obligation. You do feel an obligation to make sure their perspective is heard. That's not being an apologist. It's called being fair.
Let me respond,
which
please.
I was told by Will Kane is very, very, very important to him.
Yes.
Let's be fair, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, hold on. Quick response here. Don't take it so personally. I wasn't talking about you. I didn't call you an apologist.
By the way,
I'm on the air debating you. Of course, I'm going to take.
You guys, let Will finish and then Max speaks
I'm
again.
lose sleep over it. I'm just responding.
But just to be clear to both.
Personally,
Max, just one second.
Richard Sherman probably doesn't take this personally. As I said, Will, you're making this about what we see in Richard Sherman. Can he be a distraction? And obviously, you know, someone who knows him and has been with him for a while says, yes, he can be. But the main thing about Richard Sherman is he gives you the straight dope. You ask him a question, Crabtree at the time, he's mediocre. That's what he felt. He will be honest, and we like that. And now here is a teammate being honest about him.
Yes.
And that's the kind of atmosphere that Pete Carroll has fostered. That's the way this team communicates. And I actually think it's one of the reasons it's a healthy team and a successful one.
Well, yes, that's great. Yes, it's a healthy team. I'm glad that Pete Carroll allows them to speak out and lets us to see the truth.
One thing, though, Will. I don't think it's healthy or successful, though, necessarily to bring the media in. he could have that conversation, Doug could have that conversation with Richard Sherman. You don't need to tell the media about it when it's a healthy team. That's my personal opinion.
Sherman tells the media about it.
Okay, but I'm just telling you, my personal opinion is you keep it inside the locker room.
Well, Doug Baldwin also suggests he would say this directly to Richard Sherman's face. In fact, I would imagine he probably has. But just to clear up one point that I think got run over. I never said you were an apologist, Stephen A., because I don't think it. I don't think you are. I think you offer harsh and exact criticism when you think it. But I don't think you are everyone in the media. And I do think there is a trend to think that anybody that offers critique of an athlete is somehow being a big bad meanie and just somehow trying to exercise their own insecurities. As we did yesterday with Darrelle Revis, the point is to be fair, as you point out, and to find the truth. And sometimes athletes need to be defended, like in Darrelle Revis' case. And sometimes, if the truth demands it, it requires criticism. And when it's being pointed out that Richard Sherman is a distraction, I think we have an obligation to then therefore show that now, especially that we know that some in the team think so.
Okay.
Okay.